Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the London Produce Show. I think that was a fabulous entry to the day. As part of the organisers, we really do appreciate your support. It's fantastic to see such a cross-section of the world's produce industry here today. I really do love to welcome you to London and really have a very, very successful few days. I know some of you have been up for a while, you've travelled some distances, and I know you enjoyed the cocktail, or I hope you enjoyed the cocktail reception last night, but I'm concerned you've had some breakfast, you watched the video, just want to make sure you're awake out there. Give me a cheer if you enjoyed the cocktail reception last night. Come on, lad, come on! I can't hear you. Fantastic, thank you for that. If you thought last night was good, you've seen nothing yet. Have a successful day. Love to talk to you as I go around the show today. Thank you all again for your support. Over to Jim. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jim Prevor, and on behalf of Produce Business Magazine and the Fresh Produce Consortium, we'd like to welcome you to the first edition of the London Produce Show and Conference. I don't want to waste any time. We have had great networking. We've had great opportunities to meet. People from 6 continents have gathered together for this event. The entire supply chain binding the world to the standard-setting capital of the produce industry here in the UK. So I want to call up right away our speakers for this panel this morning so we can move right into the discussion that we want to have today. So if I could ask our speakers to come on up. Every chair is marked. You can sit down, Bruce. It's okay. My American President John F. Kennedy once hosted a dinner for the winners of the Nobel Prize, and he opined that he thought there had never been such a gathering of intelligence and ability in the White House, with the possible exception of when Thomas Jefferson dined alone. I look across this panel and have similar thoughts. I'm going to ask each one of our panelists to just briefly identify themselves, identify their role in the industry, and we'll take it from there. James, why don't you start us out?
So I'm James Anstead. I work for Barclays as a food retail analyst on the European food retail sector.
I'm Andrea Felsted. I'm the senior retail correspondent at the Financial Times.
Morning, I'm Doug Gilchrist. I head up the supply chain for Gather & Gather, which is the catering business for Mighty, the facility management company.
Morning, my name is Johannes Holzhausen. I manage a chain of supermarkets in the Middle East, in the UAE.
Good morning, my name is Paul Nealand. I am a Vice President of Produce Floral, Seafood and Meat for King's Food Markets in Metro New York.
Good morning, I'm Chris Mack. I'm Chairman of the Fresca Group. We're growers, importers, packers, wholesalers here in the UK.
Good morning, Gary Marshall. I'm Chairman of the Covent Garden Tenants Association, and I'm also the proprietor of Bevington Salads, which is a traditional wholesale and importing company within New Covent Garden Market.
Good morning, I'm Bruce Peterson. I'm president of Peterson Insights. I'm a consultant to the produce industry in the States, formerly senior vice president of perishables for Walmart stores.
Good morning, I'm Tony Reynolds. I'm a third generation greengrocer, and I'm the MD of Reynolds, who supply the food service industry.
Good morning, my name's Adam Wakely. I'm the owner and managing director of Organic Farm Foods, suppliers of organic fruit to the supermarkets, growers of organic apples in Ledbury, and have a service provision business.
Hello, I'm Valentine Warner. I'm a cook, food writer and broadcaster.
Many thanks. You know, we've been thinking about the idea of doing an event like this for some time, and we were held back for many years. Why were we held back? Because when we went to visit places that were major supply sources for the United Kingdom, say South Africa, more often than not, what I would be told by producers in these markets was that they perceived the UK market, which was one of their highest volume, most important, and long-standing markets, they perceived there to be basically 4 customers to sell in the whole country. They perceived that they were extremely tough on standards, very demanding, and they all wanted to pay the lowest price that they possibly could get. So this often led them to say that although this was an important market, it wasn't the place where they wanted to invest their marketing dollars, because they said, well, let's try and sell elsewhere where perhaps the standards won't be quite as tough, where the demands for the difficulty of making a profit won't be quite as challenging. But one of the things that has happened is that the UK market has begun to change. On the retail side, you have a growing and substantial hard discount sector. You have on the upscale side certain chains that have really started to capture some of the most valuable customers. You have American interlopers like Costco and Whole Foods entering the market. You have the internet shopping services booming. And on top of that, you have a culinary change that's occurred in the UK with a situation where 20 years ago, people didn't think of London when they were thinking of a place to go for fine food. Now it's one of the culinary capitals of the world. So all these things sort of transpired to make us feel that the time was right, that there were new opportunities sort of simpering around the essence of the market. I'd actually like to ask you, Chris, first. You know, in many ways, yourself and your father really are the father of the contemporary distribution system for the UK multiples. How do you see that system evolving over the next 10 years?
Oh, that's an interesting question to start the morning with. I think that if I look back on the history of the business, and it does certainly predate me, we started supplying one of the very first multiple retailers here in the UK, which were Marks and Spencer's, when they opened a warehouse in the original Covent Garden market back in the 1930s. The world has changed significantly since those days, and the thing I would say at the moment is that because of the economic drivers that we're seeing in the marketplace and the fact that the market's becoming quite mature, what we're now seeing is change happening at a rate which I've never experienced before. So most of the multiple retailers here are looking in towards their businesses, trying to work out the best way to procure top quality produce sustainably, but in a world that's becoming more and more economically competitive. So I think there are real issues in there, and everybody's looking at the way they do business and trying to modify their supply chain. How the world looks now and how the world will look in 5 years' time will be very different. And I'm also seeing quite a lot of polarization between the different models that people are adapting. The best people as ever will be the people who sit there and really try and work out a long-term strategic plan and implement it with conviction. The ones that will struggle are the ones that make a knee-jerk reaction to short-term economic realities and will struggle in 5 years' time.
James, you follow closely the financial results of all the public retail companies in the UK and in Europe. Are they making those knee-jerk reactions, or are they, do they have good strategic focus that's going to lead to success?
Well, they're certainly putting an awful lot of thought into where the industry is going in the next 10 years, and it's probably changing more rapidly at the moment than it has done for a very long time. So it's a big question whether people are doing the right things and whether they're doing fast enough. But certainly, you know, all the retailers are very focused on the growth of online. Everyone is getting involved in that very quickly. Morrison was clearly very nervous about the fact they didn't have an online operation and really moved in that direction pretty quickly. The bigger question, perhaps, is how they really deal with the rise of the hard discounters, which is something that is much more of a challenge. The online grocers are growing at perhaps 15% a year, but a lot of that is kept. A lot of that growth is going to Tesco.com, Sainsbury's online. The real challenge are the hard discounters, which are growing at 30% a year from an increasingly big base. And if you look across Europe, the market share of the hard discounters is typically 15-20% or more. And we still, even after the big growth we've seen in the UK recently, we're still only looking at 8 or 9%. And that's going to be something that continues to grow for quite some time to come. And how you deal with that is difficult for the big retailers, because the hard discounters have a very different cost structure, and it's not just about price. And trying to combat that is a big challenge for the existing retailers.
Bruce, dealing with the issue of discounters is not something that someone who grew up with Walmart would be unfamiliar with. How did other retailers deal with what was then perceived as a great discounter when Walmart rolled out across North America? And how is Walmart dealing with the idea of people like Aldi, who just announced that they're going to go from 1,000 to 1,500 stores in America over the next couple of years?
Well, I think the real challenge with any kind of a retail format is to understand what your consumer value proposition is. And so that if your value proposition is one based on price, take Walmart for example, and that's your calling card, that's what you're going to drive your reputation on. If you have a competitive force that moves into the area that begins to undermine that value proposition, you've got a challenge. And historically, as we watched Walmart's growth in the 90s and into the turn of the century in 2000s, a lot of retailers tended to knee-jerk and tried to react and respond to what Walmart was doing to become more like a Walmart, and they forgot what their own value proposition was. And you see that historically throughout retail, and so it's so important to, as we were saying earlier, to identify who are you, what is your strategic focus, and can you execute against that plan as the competition around you begins to evolve?
Well, Valentine, you must listen to all this and you must sort of recoil, because all this focus on value proposition and the idea of finding the most efficient path, that's a different kind of food environment than you imagine for UK consumers.
It is. It is what we're living in at the moment. What concerns me, or what I'm interested in, is that as we are becoming increasingly urban, you could no longer call the UK a rural country. Our ties with husbandry, the rhythms of nature have been broken. Therefore, we're not required to know too much information anymore. Our food is processed for us and picked for us. So it's very interesting for me, kind of what we're losing, and also learning at the same time what we're gaining, how we waste food or don't waste it, why have certain things that we used to enjoy completely disappeared. And it could also almost makes me feel mad sometimes, walking around wondering what's going on in the supply and demand industries. And it's an ongoing conversation that really, my concerns are that is really for looking at the future and how we can kind of support this growth as it goes. But I don't know what the answer is. No, I don't know that there is.
Well, Doug, maybe you have the answer to that, because aren't you, in a sense, trying to find a happy medium, if you will, combining some of the ethos that Valentine's talking about with an efficient supply chain?
Exactly. I mean, first of all, I have to say the video that you started with, Jim, I thought was fantastic. It is about seasonality and provenance, innovation. I would say in some ways keep it simple. We're growing some fantastic products in this country and from wider field. Let's not overcomplicate it. Tell us what we are doing. Tell us the great things about it, what's new. Of course, we need a fair price. We're a commercial business. But let's try and focus on sourcing great products that actually sell more food and get the customers are far more excited about food these days than they've ever been. There's so much high profile, isn't there?
But Johannes, among other things, you're the licensee for Waitrose in Dubai. Are you focused on buying a lot of locally grown organic Dubai produce?
growing things in the Middle East is not the easiest. Growing them truly organic is probably more of a challenge than anything else. You know, we've learned a little bit that the supply chain is probably more brutal if you deal in the Middle East. If something breaks in your supply chain, you don't have another guy that sits around the corner that you can find them from. You have to go and find that stuff somewhere in the world. And if it's a short shelf life item, you have a couple of days to get it into the country, or you just would not have that. So what we've learned, and dealing with Waitrose is very interesting, where your standards and your specifications is extremely high, and I have to constantly remind them that my decision today is sometimes not to buy the best product on the market, but to buy a product that is safe and sound and consumers can have. That learn you a little bit of a different discipline occasionally, and sometimes I fear that our retailers are a little bit too presumptuous in the standards that we set. The question on watching the financials, a CEO in the US have a shelf life of 2.5 years today. The average investor on the New York Stock Exchange keep their stock 6 months. And you deal with growers that put a tree in the ground and will pick it 6 years from now. And I think the challenge between the strategic objectives and the long-term view and the pressure of short-term results is going to be one of the things that the industry has to deal with going forward.
Adam, what do you think about that? Is it okay to have this idea that we need just adequately safe and sound produce, or is there something else we should be looking for?
Well, safe produce is essential. You know, my view, I'm an organic farmer, I'm an organic importer, and you know, that's not widely accepted as a sustainable way forward by most people in the industry because of yield and feeding the population. But you know, I genuinely believe that what we do to our land and what we do to our food should take some degree of responsibility. I, for one, don't want to eat food that's been covered in pesticides. My choice, not everyone's choice. I also want to see farming which takes care of the soil for the future generations, because the effects of not considering the environment and the soil are huge. So organic farming has a place, and it's a choice, and it's not everyone's choice, and not everyone can afford it. But I do believe that if there is a passion about provenance and about sustainability and about the future of food production, then you have to consider not necessarily organic certification, but organic methods of farming.
Tony, you know, was I right? I went all over the world to tell people about this show, and I said, don't worry about those 4 big retailers. I said there's so many other opportunities, and those opportunities will ultimately change what people buy at retail too. And I said we can really look at the catering sector, the food service sector for growth and opportunity. Was I on the right track in telling people this?
Yeah, I think certainly in the experience of Reynolds, we've seen massive growth in the eating out market, and as a greengrocer, we've obviously had to gear up to get our products into this massive boom that we saw in London to start with, but now it's gone completely national, and the figures are telling us that that's going to continue to grow with the increase in population and urbanisation and everything. So I think for produce suppliers, you know, food service is definitely something that we definitely want to be talking to more people about getting that product through our supply chain. And, you know, there's an open invitation to anyone in this room to come and join us at our London base. You've been there, Jim, and just have a look around at what we're doing, because it's really, really moving on quickly.
Gary, with all these changes going on, one of the, my father used to come and trade in the UK and sell American apples and things like that, and he would go to the old original Covent Garden and talk to you. Is there still a place for the traditional wholesaler in this new mix?
Well, obviously sitting up here with the gentleman I'm sharing the stage with and the ladies, and we're talking about Walmart and massive conglomerates and food service, let's just cast our eyes back. If you are an independent grower, if you're starting off, if you want to develop a product, you can't walk into Walmart, you can't walk into Marks and Spencer's. You've got to find a market that want to embrace, encourage, and help you with their passion and with their desire, build that product. And the London markets, there's 3 major London markets. I have the opportunity to represent New Covent Garden, which I'm very proud of. But we've also got Chris Hutchinson here from Spitalfields, and Jonathan Hill couldn't make it from Weston. The 3 London markets turn over just shy of £2 billion. They employ just shy of 6,000 people. There's 400 independent and passionately run small business. That is where the nucleus of where we are. And what we're seeing, we've started with the recession, is a desire for the housewife to go out and find value for money. But not only value for money, they're learning to shop again. They want to taste, they want to smell, they want to feel. So I believe that face-to-face trading is now at its strongest point. New Covent Garden market is full for the first time in its 40-year history. And it's you know, there is nothing better. Hopefully a lot of you will make the visit tomorrow to New Covent Garden market, and you will see the diversity in products. You'll see the individual grower that will only send to market 4, 5, 6 boxes. But he hasn't got the opportunity to send that anywhere else. He has to send it to his wholesale market. We started this business. It all started from wholesale markets, and it all started from face-to-face trading. And I'd like to make the statement that whatever happens anywhere else, we will be there at the very end, as we were at the very beginning, because we know what we do, and we provide, with anything else, the starting block for everybody in small business. My dad had a fruit stall, very similar to Tony. I'm a 3rd generation greengrocer. Now I'm a wholesaler, and my brother runs a food service company. And we just love what we do. We want to meet people from around the world. I visit South Africa, I look at products there, and I go around Europe looking at products. And there's nothing better than being inspired by finding something that nobody else has got and giving that to your customers. You all want exclusivity, and you want something that's special. And please, don't turn your back on the wholesale markets, because we are the foundation, and we will make sure that we're at the very end when all these chaps are driving about in their yachts.
Well, that's the power of the passionate pitch. Andrea, you know, when people look at the market and they talk about the deep discounters coming in and they talk about all the new players, one of the things that happens when new players come in is old players react. And how do all these changes was talking about, how are they going to change the big 4 retailers here in the UK?
Well, they're already changing them because the market is changing so much. The supermarket, where we, you know, for the last 50, 60 years, we all went to the supermarket maybe once a week, once a month, did a big shop, drove home again. That is really breaking down. Consumers are shopping more locally, more frequently. They're going to the hard discounters, but they're also buying, you know, more upmarket, more fresh. We're seeing a little bit of a return to butchers, bakers, greengrocers, and that is fundamentally shifting the retail landscape. And the big 4 are having to adapt to that. They're going into smaller formats. They are trying to make big stores more appealing, to get people back into big stores. And they are trying to sort of make things more experiential, and they're trying to cut prices to deal with the hard discounters, and that's an awful lot to do at the same time. And we're seeing some really, you know, big effects of that. Tesco said yesterday they were having their worst trading in the UK for 40 years. Morrison's had a massive profit warning. They are struggling to find their place in the market. So the market is being changed, and the market is being changed by fundamental shifts in the way we all want to shop.
What about across the pond, Paul? you know, Andrea talks about going to smaller stores. Your company never really moved away from smaller stores. You went through a buyout from Marks and Spencer, and then Marks and Spencer left. And now you've had a new approach to try and differentiate yourself from the mainstream retailers. How are you playing that out, and what do you think the lessons you're getting from this might be in your efforts?
Well, it's very interesting because Chris said it very well. Strategically, we looked at it from a 5-year plan. Who are we? Who do we want to be? It's not about being like everybody else. That's not what King's is about. Strategically, we looked at what our consumers like. So we're not positioned as when I say value, I mean price-driven retailer in Metro New York. We're perceived as a value as this product is the best you can possibly get, and it's worth it. So you may pay a little more, but it's worth it. Long run, we have a lot of people coming in, cutting prices, coming in with programs, trying to be like everybody else. What I heard from the panel here, we're not doing that. We're trying to stay head and shoulders above everybody else. We're trying to position ourselves with the best possible variety, the best possible quality that we can possibly get. And also, I heard food service mentioned a few times. Our food service part of our business is growing exponentially. So we're talking about food service almost becoming the same percentage of sales in our stores as produce is. So it's very interesting.
So one of the thoughts you're saying is that retail itself is being transformed so that the food service component at retail is a key profit, image, and a key driver of success. How would retailers reach out to kind of complete that kind of transformation? Bruce, you were involved in quite a few extensive efforts to look at using food service, but at the same time Walmart pulled back with some of the labor issues and the idea of putting that much labor in the stores. Here in the UK, Whole Foods opened a large store a few years ago, heavy to labor, heavy to food service, and it almost bankrupted them. Now they've changed and they're doing smaller stores with more modest food service enterprises. How can this kind of synergy come about?
Well, I think you get into a situation where you're looking at consumer behavior, particularly in that demographic between 28 and 35-year-old person. There's really a blending about how people shop and what they think about in terms of food preparation and how they bring products to the home. And I do think that Western Europe in general, the UK in particular, has been ahead of the United States for quite some time in prepackaged and value-added types of offerings to the consumer. And what you're seeing in the States is this major change in how food is prepared for the table. Where it's bought, how it's consumed, how it's prepared is very important. And so you're starting to see, as mentioned earlier, a more emphasis on a lot of these retailers in prepared foods or how these offerings are made available to the consumer and end user. So this has been very evolutionary in its scope.
Tony, is there any opportunity for a company like yours to be involved in that kind of transformation at retail?
But there's always opportunity. But I think for Reynolds anyway, we're very much focused on supplying the food service market directly, and you know, we still feel that there's plenty more growth in that area, and we need to keep focused on that. I think opportunities present themselves regularly, but we don't want to water down the service and the effect that we have currently as a business, and very much our 5-year plan is to keep growing as we are. Obviously consider opportunities, but just keep core to our values.
Mm-hmm. Valentine, do you think of someone like Chris Mack here? Do you think of him as your enemy?
No. I think it's really about everybody talking to each other. I think we're in a very strange situation in this country. On the one hand, we can argue we're having a food revolution. I would maybe argue that we're not having a food revolution. We are apparently so busy that we don't have the time to cook. We know very, very little about our food. And I think that's, you know, I've spent quite a long time badly informed, being cross, and now really what it's for me to do is at the moment to try and kind of amass information about what is going on, how things are being grown. I completely agree with what Adam said. It's really about, we can only be here because of nature. Nature gives us the very thing that keeps us alive, and if we don't look after it, we're going to have some very, very severe problems. And so it's really about working with people like Mr. Mack and everyone else. And